Okay, let's look at another scenario out of this box. This is the Mayfair Lookout combo that came out recently. I'm going to look at 1844. Now this is going to be more of a first look than it was for 54, because 54 I had played a game of it, most of a game of it, opposed, and in order to prepare for that I did my first look just fiddling around with some of the pieces. I only got through a few operating rounds. With this is really completely new to me, except for I've read the rules. Let's take a look at some of the components that are here. Oh, again, I want to thank the guy who sent this to me, and one of my viewers. He sent me a couple of games, high quality, expensive, new condition stuff, just because he wants me to, do them on video. And I really, I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. I feel embarrassed, humbled, something. I don't know what the feeling is, but also very, very happy to be able to look at these games. Okay. So, first thing is, this is going to be Switzerland, and we can take a look at the board. Again, a lot of terrain, but lower costs than we saw in Austria over most of it, although over here it gets pretty hefty. And again, the nature of the game may be such that those costs mean more than they seem to. We have actually some barrier tiles. Those are always kind of a pain in the butt, but I discussed them back in the 54, that sometimes they make some sense. That game had no barriers in it except for gray tiles that you couldn't move through. You got some really weird stuff like this piece, which is going to go over here and generate some track all at once based on some of the play events. Different trains, in this case, they're a little cheaper than they were over in 54, and they each have a they each have a reverse side. Well, they each have a reverse side that's a hex-based train, which is a little cheaper, and it says, that's unlike the normal XX, hey, this is the number of cities you can hit, this is the number of hexes your train can pass through. Which, if you're in a tight little location where you have a couple of cities to hit that are right next to each other, like say this run or something, that's kind of cool, because you can get by with a cheaper train. Of course, it means that if you get that route cut off or whatever, you have no chance to recover from it as easily. The game has some interesting tokens that aren't explained in the game, but that we'll take a look at. One of them is these here for B and Z. We have a token that's for Bern and Zurich. We don't have one for Lausanne here. These are kind of cool because they help you remember that if this is how you're supposed to use them, that hex has been upgraded in some way. Now, I don't know if that's really necessary. Yes, it's necessary for the yellow tile. After the yellow tile, and this is why Lausanne doesn't have one, because it's already got the yellow tile in place. In terms of track, you have the same base track that you had in 54, the stuff without the equal signs, which means we've still got these two gray cities. The grays and brown cities have a blank side to them, which caused me some definite problems and probably will again. But you also have some city-specific tiles, of course. You have ooh-oohs. I know 30 and 35 had these. Basically, you have these double cities, kind of like Lausanne here, that are yellow track, and they can be upgraded to these double O's. They upgrade further to brown double O's. Pretty exciting. I don't think there's any strange track upgrades in this. Let's take a look. So, Doinkers can upgrade to more mobile doinkers. They're not worth anything more, and they still kind of screw your run, but at least you're not stuck with that track for the rest of the game because there's some tiny little town there. You're going to have the same problems with not many brown tiles in this game. That looks like it's about it, other than the special city upgrades on that side. Nothing too shocking. A lot of companies come in several different flavors again, which of course makes things complex. These, I think, have something to do with the tunnels. Again, I have read the rules and I don't know quite how they're to be used. And again, also these. So sometimes you could go into debt in this game. It's not a good thing to have happen because you're going to have to pay interest each turn. Again, not explained completely in the rules how you use the tokens, but I think what you do is you take cash from the bank or something and mark it with a debt marker. It's not like the loans. It's not something that your company does. It's when you're given a forced train purchase. If you don't want to sell stock, or if you can't sell stock for it, you can take out a loan for the remainder of the money. That loan, like I said, is a penalty. You pay 50% of it in interest, I think, each stock round. We'll see when we hit the thing. This is a special train that corresponds, I believe, maybe not. I thought it corresponded with this, the SBB, which is sort of a national railway. Some of the corporations, I think these blue guys, fall into it, but I may be mistaken. It may be the gray guys. Those are your different tiers of companies by the color of the background. So there's 6 regular companies. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think these are the ones that turn into the SBB, actually. Yeah. And then these are something else. The game holds up to 7 people, and there are 7 private companies. The private auction is going to be a little different than you're used to. If you take a look at the starting capital, some quick math will show you the more players there are, the more money there is out in play. And on the other side of this, what do we have? We have the certificate limits, fixed in this game by the number of players. All right. Train progression looks like 1830, but there are a lot of trains in this game, which is sensible because there are a lot of companies in this game. Ava might go with something else. We'll see. I seem to remember it being called out specifically. Yeah, you know, I haven't looked at the map too much, but whenever I look at this, I'm like, wow, there's a lot going on there. On the map. All right. So, at the beginning of the game, yeah, you have to buy the trains in order, of course. No exemptions here, I don't think. I don't know what the E is for. It may be a skip train, we'll see. All right. So some special things. 10% shares of the FNM are placed in the bank pool. God. These are really hard to read. That's this. Okay. So we didn't set up completely. Alright, we may come back for a moment. Yeah, some of these come with special stuff. So for example, this comes with the first tunnel company. And we'll explain that in a little bit. 10% share, 20% president's share is over here. So it looks like that's going to float as soon as the privates drop. And then the Ava train is linked to this. Whatever that means. Okay. So, different types of corporations. These are the regional railway companies, the blues. And when they float, they're going to get half their full capitalization in their treasury. They're only allowed to own H trains, and they can't go off to red spaces, the off-board spaces. Now, the off-board spaces aren't available to the H trains, so that's set. They have a maximum share price. They can own 2 trains at most, and they must have a train if they have a route. They don't have a destination. There's going to be destinations in this game. Destinations are places you have to reach, and I believe they're marked on here. That may be what these counters are for. I bet you it is. Just an additional thing, because again, when you cover up a destination, you don't know where that company's got to go, and that way you can also record that they've taken the destination by removing it off. The destination is going to be important because that's how you get your other half of your money. But these don't have a destination. What's up with that? Well, they only have 5 shares. So their shares are a bigger percentage, but I think a 20% share, we'll see. We'll see. I was going to say, I think a 20% share is going to be at the stock value, as opposed to... Okay, the large historical companies, H1 through 6, which I believe are these yellow ones, are 10 shares each. They get half their treasury, half their full capitalization when they float, and the other half once they reach their destination. There can't be any tokens in between that block them. They can own up to 4 trains, depending on the phase, and that seems to follow the 1830 flavor there. Well, a lot of times I say 18XX when I mean 30. I'm just kind of silly about that, because 30 is my starting place. And their station markers, and this is an interesting thing, you'll see there's hordes of station markers on these things. Yeah, it depends on their starting par. This is a nice mechanism. I thought it was just going to be fluid, but the more money you put in at the beginning, the more stations they get, and it ranges from 1, when they par at 60, all the way up to a full 5 station markers at a par of 100. What that means is if you start the company low, it's never going to expand big. No matter what you do to shift trains around it or anything like that, it's just never going to be a monster on the board. I like this because one of the things I didn't like with most of the 18XX games, the tokens are so fixed to, hey, you start a corporation and it doesn't keep in mind anything to do with what it floats at or how well it's doing or whatever. It just has to do with, hey, it's the Boston and Maine, it's not going to go very far. On the other hand, you might get some ahistorical corporations here. Not that I'm a student of Swiss railways well enough to know any of that. Okay, pre-SBBs, that's these 5 gray companies. They only have 4 shares and only get twice their issue price as treasury. They get the other 2 times when they reach their destination hex. And again, there we're seeing this. The number of shares is the amount of money that's in there. They can own 2 trains, but they don't have to have any. They can build at most 2 stations, and they cannot own private companies. The Swiss State Railway enters the game by merging the SBBs. And this is a forced merger that happens, I think, when the 5s come out. It starts off with an issue price of 100 francs, a 5H train, and an additional $400 to whatever gets dumped into it. So no matter what, it's in a state that is not going to be deadly to the player who ends up with it. It can own at most 4 trains, and you'll end up exchanging shares, as you often do with these government railways. The private railroad companies have a fixed income payment on them. and that goes either to the owner. That goes to the owner, either the player or the company. They cannot do anything with track. Their certificates do not count against the share limit. Wow, that's going to be hard to remember. Starting in Phase 3, the company can use the special property of a private railway owned by that company and or by the director of the company. So even if you haven't sold it in, you can use its special ability. All right, and there's mountain railways, 1 through 5 here. These are each the same. They cost $150 to buy. When you buy it, you put the marker on one of the still unoccupied designated mountain hexes. I believe that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these. 6, 7. Yeah. Okay, so they don't tell you. But those look like mountains as opposed to the tunnels. And you put an income panel next to it. And that's these. Oh, that's next to it. The railway companies can run to this mountain railroad to receive income. As soon as this happens the first time, the mountain railroad starts giving, and you flip it over to indicate this, a $40 payout each round. The mountain railways that have been used at least once have a value of $150 at the end of the game. If they're never visited, they don't have any value at all, and the certificates don't count against the share limit. So that's kind of cool. It's a place you can put a wad of money if you're banging up against the certificate limit. But it can also be useful because it opens up, at least up to the brown, and through the green and brown, a nice little railway location. Then when it hits gray, you can see they hit only $10, and that's not very good. But they're different. So you have your choice here, I guess, unless they have some numerical. Huh. Interesting. Wow. Might be especially useful if you're looking at running one of these, that you might want the one that makes big money during the green phase. Of course, it's good during the brown too, but the brown phase doesn't often last very long. Who knows in this game though? There are a lot of trains. There's 4 5s, so. And the 6s do not bring the gray. It's the 8s that bring the gray. Okay. Then we have tunnel companies. There's 5 of these. They only cost $50, and you can purchase them in the stock round. The tunneling company certificate allows a company owned by the owner of the tunneling certificate to build a tunnel. After this right is exercised and the train uses the tunnel, it flips over and it gives $10 a round, which is kind of nice. It's like this, but for the whole game. A tunnel company has a value of $50 if at the end of the game at least a train used it. If it was never used, it has no value, and again, it doesn't count against share limit. It's kind of nice. All right, let's swap batteries and take a little break. Well, enough of a break for me to light my pipe at least. All right, then we go to the private auction. Well, we start the game by going to the private auction. The first player, this is not like your normal packet auctions. Officially, different players auction off each one, but it doesn't really matter for that. The first player has the first option to buy this at $20. Or to bid $20 on it, or more. Each player in turn can bid on that particular item. And eventually someone bids an amount, and I don't know how I'm going to do this, that, everybody passes, and they get this. then player 2 gets to start on this one, and so on. If this sucker doesn't sell, if nobody was willing to pay 20 for it, it goes down to 15 and is offered to the first player, and then down to 10, and finally down to 0, they have to take it. That's a fairly standard rule in XX games, but usually there's something going on with all these others, not in this one. When this one's auctioned off, if everybody passes, or any further ones, if everybody passes and nobody wants to buy it at face value, hey, too bad. Time to go to an operating round, and the people who own private companies get their payout. So there's a strong incentive for not letting that happen. Because somebody is going to want to buy them to prevent the income from happening. Okay. After all of them sell out, and that probably will happen in the first round just because of the rule. 0 with the trade if you're not going to start a company. Then you can buy and sell the public companies. You can buy these, the mountain and tunnels. And this works kind of as normal. Sell all your shares, then you can buy a certificate or share. Okay, you can't sell any shares in the first stock round of the game. You can't sell shares if more than half the shares in the company end up in the stock pool, in the bank pool. You can't sell You can't sell shares if the director's certificate hasn't been bought. There'd be no price. You can't sell the director's certificate directly into the bank pool. You have to exchange it. Standard stuff here. Okay, during emergency sales, you can't sell off a company. You can't dump a company, even a different company. This is something that I was talking about in 54. I don't think it's in 54, but it's a rule that really is kind of a friendly rule, because you can engineer it so that you're dumping a company that somebody has priority on you, thinks they're safe, during the operating rounds, just by a forced stock sale. You can't do it in this game. Okay. You're allowed to buy one certificate, basically, either share of a company, a certificate of a mountain railroad, or tunnel company. The money always goes to the bank. You either pay par from initial offering or from this tiny little bank pool. That's going to be a problem. You pay the current price. When you buy the president's certificate, you set the price. You pay twice that value. Now, this is interesting because I paid twice the price for this 40% share. Like I said, that's 2 shares. That's 40% of the company. It's not, some kind of 4 shares or something like that in there. So it doesn't gain stock value as quickly as some of the others. Okay. These, I think, are the maximums for these 3 railroads. Okay. You can't buy shares of a company you've previously sold in the stock round. You can only buy 1 tunnel company during any given stock round. You can only buy 1 mountain railway during any given stock round. If you already have more than half the shares of a company, this is a little weird. You can only buy further shares from that company if they're in the bank pool. You can't buy them from the initial offering. Okay, normally, games don't let you buy above 50 or 60%. This game says, well, whatever that percentage is, 50, 60, whatever, because with this railway, you can have 75%. You can have you can buy the 50% share and the 25% share. You can't buy that last 25% share. But you can buy it if it ends up in the bank pool, which is kind of interesting. When a company reaches 50%, it will float, or launch, as they say in these. Like I said, they get an appropriate issue price. If it's a major corporation, it's going to be 5 times the treasury, but it differs by the different companies. Regionals 5 times. The pre-SBBs only get 2 times. Oh. Does that make sense? Yeah, I guess. Okay. Once you connect up to the destination, a large historical company gets the other 50%, or the other 5 times its issue price, and a pre-SBB company gets twice. Again, a match of what it started with, half its capitalization as before. However, if trains are launched after the first 6 train or 6H is bought, they don't deal with destinations. They get their full cash right up, which is, I don't know, similar to 56, but not quite the same. Changes of director, looks pretty standard. Share limit, pretty standard. There's no special spaces. The stock round ends when everybody passes. You get the priority. Yeah. Okay. So, the share price will be adjusted at the end of the stock round. If the company has any shares in the bank pool, it moves a space left. It loses value. That's kind of different. If they have all the shares in players' hands, it shifts 1 to the right. No, up 1 row. Sorry. Otherwise, it stays where it is. So it's no big deal to not buy them out of the initial offering. Well, if you get everything sold out, it's a bonus. But leaving stuff in the bank pool is a bad idea, which might be interesting. But there are things that happen here. Okay, standard order here. Building track, it's the normal 1 track lay or upgrade. Pretty standard rules there as far as I can see. Okay, once either a pre-SBB or historical company reaches its destination city, then it will get its cash immediately. Now, the Gothard doesn't have a normal destination city. That's this one. That needs a particular tunnel to be built. I don't know where the Gothard starts. It's going to be like something 5, and it's kind of yellow. There it is, V5. It needs this tunnel to be built. Once that's built, it has reached its destination automatically. Now that tunnel is part of this sucker. So we have to see, oh no, that's the regular track. There's still a tunnel that goes, and the Gothard tunnel I think can go from either of these spaces across. Remember, there's no sharp tunnels. We're using the same tunnels as from 54. Okay. In addition to your normal track lay, if you have a tunnel company, you can flip it over and build a tunnel on a marked tunnel hex. Now, the tunnels are built between mouths shown. They cost 100 from the company's treasury. So it costs you $50 to buy the rights for the tunnel. The company still has to blast through it with another $100 out of its cash. And you can actually build more than one tunnel in a turn if you have multiple of those certificates at the same time. Now, these are not linked to any particular location. So you can control the tunnel, you can get the jump on someone and leave them stranded with a tunnel company that they haven't been able to place. Then you're allowed to place a station marker as of normal. This game is very clear that when there's multiple circles in a space, there are multiple cities. You can run through both of them. You can only have one token in a hex, though, and that is the same as 1830, which can make oohs kind of interesting, where you don't really necessarily want your run to loop through both of them, even though they're valuable spaces. The station's $40 for the first one. Each additional will cost you $100. Then you can run your trains, again, kind of as standard. The H trains are a little different, but you can only go so many hexes, but otherwise they run like a normal train. You have to run between two cities. You can't visit the same mountain railway more than once. I think same with tunnels. Tunnels give a bonus. Yeah. Tunnels increase the revenue of the train going through it. Okay, so the actual revenue is calculated as you would think. Trying to see the tunnel bonus. If you go through a tunnel with a station or other scoring tile on both sides of the tunnel, i.e. you were using it for a reason, you get an extra $10 added to the value of each city, mountain railway, or off-board hex reached. That is huge. Remember, it doesn't count against your train ride to run through the tunnel. Because it's not a station. So you can essentially, off like a 4 or 5 train, get an extra big city off of your run by doing so. And that counts with doinkers too, right? Yeah, doinkers are small cities, that's all they are. The revenue, okay, you have to pay the highest, yeah. Okay, now you decide what to do with your money as usual. And you can either pay it out to the stockholders or to the railway. And if you pay out to players, if you pay out a dividend, the unsold shares go back to the bank, money-wise. But shares in the bank pool, like in 1830, go into the company treasury. If the company pays out a dividend, the share price rises, and it goes right a space. If it fails, it goes back left a space, correct? Huh? Wait. Nope. It does not go back. Oh, here, wait. Here we go. Yeah, if you don't pay out dividend, the price does fall. It goes left a space. Okay, then you can purchase trains. There are a few little gotchas in here, a few little changes from the normal. You got your maximums. You have to buy them in order. You have the option of buying either the base train or the H train that's cheaper. We'll have to look at the forced sales to see if you get that choice. You may get the H train. You can buy from other corporations once the 3 trains are out. This price is negotiable, but must be at least $1. But if it's between 2 different companies, 2 different players' companies, it has to be made at face value. Again, you're not allowed to be too dicky in this one. You can rape a company with your own corporation, but you can't do that with someone else's. I find that to be particularly an egregious rule because there are times when it behooves both players to make the deal. It's not just a matter of spite, but anyway. Okay, so if you emergency finance a train, i.e. you have a train and you must buy it, you make up the deficit from private assets. You may go into debt. you can also sell shares at that point. The share sales don't change the director. I assume they change the value of the stock prices. Hey, we haven't looked at that. Let's go back to selling shares. Looks like it goes down one space for any number of shares. That's a 35 thing. That's again a reduce the dickiness factor in the game. It doesn't make much sense to buy a lot of shares and try to trash the share value when there's that kind of rule. And you can't buy back shares you've sold. So I guess you could buy a lot of shares and sell them off one at a time. We've seen that happen in 35. Okay. You can't sell your privates, your tunnels, your mountains. When you've sold all the shares you want, you have to pay 50% income on the remaining debt. Yeah. Does that mean you take out more debt and some kind of recursive function is in play here? I don't know. If you don't have the cash on hand. In subsequent stock rounds, there's no compulsion to sell the shares to reduce the debt, but you can't buy any shares while you have debt. At the end of each stock round, you'll pay a 50% income again on whatever remaining debt you have. There's no bankruptcy. The game won't end because somebody screws up. If different trains are available, the director, gets to choose which one he wants to buy. A lot of flexibility there. You don't get screwed with like an old Ford train just before it's going to crash, which always sucks so bad. Additionally, this is important because you don't get stuck with the 4H or the 5H when what you really want is the full number train. What about the phases? Anything exciting here? Phase 1 looks normal. Okay. Phase 2. As soon as the first 2 train is bought, and we've got a limit of 4 for historical companies, then a new mechanism takes place. At the end of each series of operating rounds, the lowest numbered train, or the train that's next available, the highest currently available train, in case there are ones in the bank pool or something, gets discarded. It has been sold abroad. This can trigger a phase change, actually, which is kind of interesting. Phase 3, the 3 trains, the greens come out. You can buy the private railways. We'll talk about them in a bit, I guess. I think we kind of missed them. Because I'm not sure. I think they can be bought only up to their face value. But I'm not seeing that easily, so I'll have to look that up. You can use the special properties of the private railways. Buying trains from other companies is allowed in 2 operating rounds. When the first 4 comes out, when the first 3 comes out, the 2s become 2Hs. Any 2 trains drop down. Now this is weird. I'm not sure whether or not you can buy 2 trains still. I think only 2Hs are available anywhere. That would make sense because you've gotten to another train phase, so all the new ones are gone. So now in phase 3, that happens. In phase 4, the 2Hs are all scrapped. The 3 trains become 3Hs. There's sort of a timed obsolescence in here where they're no longer capable of making those big runs, but you can use them locally. The train limit drops to 3. When the first 5 train is bought, brown tiles come out, the train limit goes down to 2, sounds like 30 there. Private railways are closed. The SBB is formed at the end of the operating round, but it's done at the beginning of the operating round in the event that the first 5 train is sold abroad. 4 trains become, there's 3 operating rounds. When the 6 comes out, the 3s are scrapped, the 4 trains drop down to 4 H's, and any companies that are launched after this point get their full capitalization. When we hit phase 7, the gray tiles become available. This is the 8 train. The 4 H's are scrapped, and 5s become 5 H's. They're permanent trains, but they're not that good. They get reduced even further from what you initially, what you'd consider them in an 1830 game. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the SBB. Well, let's go back and look at, try to look for the privates, what price you can sell them for. So that gives me time to take a little breather. So I found the rule on the sale of privates. They can go up to double, anywhere from $1 to double their value. But you can't sell them to the pre-SBBs. So you can't screw over the SBB by dumping a lot of money out of it into your hands. That's a pretty interesting factor. That means they're gonna pretty naturally run. They can buy trains between each other, so you can still rape them with one of your corporations, but you can't do them in with one of these, whatever these things go for. We'll see the special rules on them. All right, before we go to the formation of the SBB, there's one other thing that I noticed in the rules that I didn't realize. The turn order is mauled after the initial auction round. So you deal out the cards, and everybody gets their bidding order as in a normal 18XX game. But then, once all the privates have been sold, however many rounds that may take, a new turn order is determined for the remainder of the round. The player with the least cash gets card number 1, the next least cash gets card 2, etc. So now, at the end of a stock round, let's see whether there's anything funky that happens there. Yeah, it's always going to be that, okay, so it's least cash over here gets priority, but here, most cash downward gets priority. This is interesting because it means that where you're physically located in the game doesn't actually matter, and I'm going to need those cards for the different player order to keep track of this. All right. So let's go back to the SBB and how this forms. At the beginning, when the first 5 train is sold, the next operating round, at the end of that operating round, you'll start the VBB or the SBB, and then it operates. If it's done during the stock round, at the end of the stock round, well, no, if it's done, it's the last action in a series of operating rounds, the SBB forms immediately. That's how selling abroad happens. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And basically everything gets agglomerated into it. All the tokens get replaced. If they double up in one tile, they only get 1 token in that tile. The director's choice. It's gonna get 400 extra bucks. It starts at 100, but at this location at 100. It has a magical 5H train, which counts towards its train limit. This cannot be traded, and it's actually printed on the manifest there. There's going to be a lot of companies out, I think, before it forms, but we'll see. Because there's so many trains that must be the case, right? Okay, so now, after it gets everything, the shares in the SBB company get exchanged for shares of the SBB. The director's share is exchanged for a double SBB share with 10% dividend. any 25% dividend is exchanged for SBB shares with 5% dividends. So you're getting significantly less percentage-wise, because these the pre-SBB shares are big shares, 50 or 25%. You're getting 1/5 of that in the conglomerate, but that makes sense because there's 5 of these, right? The difference between the share price of the pre-SBB and the start price of the SBB, 100 francs, is paid out by the bank. But if you're lower, you have to pay the difference. If you don't have enough cash, you're in debt to the bank. Your first action the following stock round must be to sell as many shares as are necessary to clear the debt. I don't think this is debt in the same way, which is kind of weird because it doesn't seem to express that it becomes normal debt where you get that 50% penalty on you. But you must pay it off as soon as possible, which is also different. Unsold shares are exchanged for shares in the bank pool. If there's more than 10 shares of the SBB in the bank pool, such as life, if no share of the pre-SBB is in players' hands, all shares of the SBB will be in the bank pool and can be bought in the stock round, including the director. I don't think that's likely to happen. Basically, it's saying if nobody's bothered to start any of these, you still have a huge corporation with $400 in a 5H trade available that can start out. Okay. Whoever has the most SBB shares will become the director. If several players have equal numbers of shares, the person with the V1 or V2 in that order becomes the director. And again, you know, if some of them don't start, they don't start. Okay. If the player with the most shares was not a director of a pre-SBB company, then they become director, but they only own 5% certificates. They exchange 2 of their single 5% certificates for a double certificate from the bank pool. If there's no double certificate in the bank pool, then they exchange with the former director of the V5 or the V4 if the V5 never came out, etc. On a change in director, the new director must give a 10% share to exchange for the director's certificate, but if he doesn't have one, he can give 2 5%. There's no cheap, in 1835 there's a cheap mechanism where you can give up 5% when you take over control of the Prussian, and that's kind of cool. The game ends when the bank runs out, and that's pretty much it. You finish up the operating rounds series, you track it on paper if need be. If it runs out in a stock round, you have to play out the entire series of operating rounds. Then you count your value, and remember these things have value only if they were used. That's that. Again, this one's going to be kind of tougher than 54 was for me because I'm starting completely new, and it's a bigger board, and it's a lot harder to figure out where the money is. You can look and see where the money's eventually going to be. It's in those letter cities, but those may not be the best starting cities. And then also you can look at the off-board, Lyon. We got some big 90s up there. The north looks less valuable. It's more valuable to trade with Italy. All right, let's send this up. I forgot all about something kind of important, which is the private railway companies, what their special deals are. Let's go through these. This is technically part of the introduction, so I'll tack it there. Nothing special with the first one. It produces $5. Second one, I don't know what that is. Once in a game, you can place an additional yellow track tile according to the rules. And it flips it over. That's a nice mechanism that 1854 also uses. I really like that. If you're going to have double-sided pieces, double printing on the pieces and the cards, it's really cool. The components here really do help largely from what I've seen. Gotthard Poach Gut. This special ability comes with a tunnel certificate. So we should look at where these suckers are. Actually, they don't exactly exist on the board. There's nothing like them. So this comes with the tunnel company. And that's all it really does, is it gives you a capability to build a tunnel at some point and get the income from that, which is kind of nice. The fourth one here, okay. The owner may at any time place this special tile. Okay. This is an additional tile lay and free of cost. However, doing so closes the company. You get $80 for doing it, though. And this happens at the latest by the sale of the first 5.5H train, in which case it is placed. It's just you have the capability of holding out till then. The fifth one comes with 10% of the MOB. You can't sell it until the MOB is bought and there's a price. So this is no big deal. It's like the Camden and Amboy, big price. You can, hammer something for $140 with that sucker. All right, the next one. This comes with the director's share of the FNM. The P6 sets the issue price. Hey, it'll be high. The P6 will be closed as soon as the FNM runs a train on the route for the first time. Since there's 3 shares in here, you're not going to have an opportunity to hold out. So you're going to get your $60 off of it. It'll go down, you're basically paying $120 for 2 shares. That's pretty good, since you can set it starting at 100. So, you're making $20 off that initially, plus you're getting the additional 60. So you're making $80 real quick. That's some nice cash. But remember, each of these is auctioned individually. So if this is seen as, being significantly valuable, a lot of people will bid on it. Of course, a lot of people might be out of money by the time it comes around. We'll see. And then the final one, the 7th one, this will be closed as soon as the first 5 or 5H train is bought. Well, that's true with all of them. That's not really a special ability, right? They are all closed. The owner, though, gets this special 5H train called the Ava. He can give it to a company immediately as long as he's the director of the company. The train limits have to be kept. Now, I think you can't exercise the special abilities until you hit phase 3. Yeah, so you're not going to get that on the 2 trains. But still, a 5H on the 3 train era, that can be pretty potent, and this is pretty interesting. Now, this one is fairly cheap, but it's still $100 that, there's nothing that says you can't sell it. So there's a lot of these that have some good cash return when you dump them into your company. However, everyone gets a right to bid on them. And the starting money, $440, $400, whatever, there might be significant people out there with enough money to make sure that the prices go for a reasonable rate given what their capabilities are. All right, we'll attach this.